Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the monastery, the open bar of the internet, the world's greatest shit show, and the place where we, the good brothers and sisters of this most holy of temples, seek enlightenment through the drunkest, craziest, and most batshit ways possible. I am your one and only gaming monk, better known as Mildra, and with me, I have a returning good brother to the temple, coming back for the first time in about 4 years and change. Previously, the man behind the Arium multiverse of games. Now, coming to us with the werewolf-themed solo RPG, Rue from Ruin. The one and only Will Munn. How you doing today, man? Or tonight, technically.
That's right, it is night. I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. It's very great to be back in the monastery.
Mm-hmm. So... Since the last time I had you on, you were just starting things out with the Arium books. How's that gone on? Is that more or less done? Are the stretch goals more or less done? I know. I've checked on it from here to there since I did back it, but yeah. having your perspective, since I haven't had you on in about 4 years, is certainly apropos.
Yeah, no, definitely. Most of them are done, so we ended up delivering 4 books. We do have one sort of add-on thing that we talked about doing, and we even drafted a manuscript for it. It's a sort of a guide to adapting Arium Create to different RPG styles, right? Mm-hmm. So sort of build in the D&D-ness of it, or the fate-ness of it, or whatever the game may be, into the world before you make the world. But that kind of got sidelined a little bit by the nonsense with Wizards of the Coast a while back.
I was at ground zero for all of that, and I'm not sure if you saw, but I did a post-mortem covering the whole thing because I wanted to give my perspective, since doing these interviews for all these years, I had talks with a lot of people who were trying to figure out what the hell was going to happen.
Yeah.
And I had looked at what was going on before and during the event, and I concluded that Wizards of the Coast was trying to prove to Daddy Hasbro that they could still be profitable after they got raked over the coals publicly over overproduction of Magic cards. And when I say publicly, I mean Bloomberg was talking shit about them.
Wow.
Like that, there were several articles getting on them for overproduction of basically producing more supply than there was demand, because I guess they thought they were still in the COVID years or something. Where a lot of tabletop people were eating good because everybody's stuck inside their homes. What else are you gonna do?
Right.
But the approach that they took was so bad that I don't think it's a surprise that they conveniently backed off the same week as they got publicly called out on Twitter by one of their investors, who called the whole thing an unforced error and called them leaderless.
Oof.
Now, in that case, he was saying that it was a dumb move to do this right when you're trying to build up hype for Honor Among Thieves, which at the time they were.
Right.
And on Honor Among Thieves, I will say it's not a bad movie. It just chose the worst time to come out.
It's a really fun movie. I enjoyed it.
Not just the OGL thing, but it came out a week after John Wick Chapter 4, and 2 weeks before Super Mario Brothers. So even as fun as a movie as it is, it had no chance against those two.
No.
I mean, you look at, say, Buckaroo Banzai Across the Eighth Dimension, which is a fun movie, but it came out the same month as Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. In fact, I think it was like a week beforehand, which you've just give up. You were trying to win that fight is like I don't know, being bringing a bunch of Pop Warner people to play against NFL players. But I also think that the comment about players being under-monetized and the fact that the head, that Cox woman had a background in Microsoft's gaming division certainly led into things. I know that they're still pushing for that virtual tabletop that's going to use the Unreal Engine. That thing's going to die.
Mm-hmm.
I have no faith in that. Mostly because it's a very competitive market with VTTs, and also, if you're just saying, oh, this is a VTT just for 5e, we already have that. It's called Shard, and doing it in 3D like that kind of misses the point of why those VTTs are so successful, which is even if you're running a potato, you can do it.
Right.
But I found out part of the reason why they were using the Unreal Engine is because they want to put it on consoles, which is very, very stupid. Because if somebody wants a D&D like experience on a game console, they're gonna play Dragon Age or Baldur's Gate or Divinity or something.
You would think, right?
Yeah, it's like how there's certain game genres that are going to lean towards certain interfaces. Like, you're not going to see someone play Civilization with a console controller.
No.
And people tried to do that with RTSs. There was that StarCraft port on the N64, and that didn't work.
No, not at all.
And in the same vein, nobody's going to be playing a fighting game with a mouse and keyboard. I'm sure if I go to Evo, I'm going to find somebody who does, but that is needle in a haystack. But with getting back on the rails with Roof from Ruin, with this being a werewolf thing, I am curious if Werewolf the Apocalypse or the Forsaken has been brought up to you during development and during the Kickstarter run.
Of course. I think to an extent, though, those are very different games at their core. From Roof from Ruin. Roof from Ruin is definitely it's intended to be a solo game. It's really easy to play with multiple players and enjoy and have a good time, I think. But our theme is sort of that cinematic werewolf story. The one, I'm not talking about Underworld or something like that. I'm talking, the more traditional style of werewolf cinema, where it's a lone werewolf that is, trying to figure out how to deal with their curse and terrorizing people kind of in the meantime. So very much the horror story, not so much the group or pack dynamic style of werewolf game.
And not blaming all of the problems on one thing. That was a problem they had with Werewolf, that everything is somehow tied to the worm, which creates I call it the Moriarty effect. Somehow Moriarty was involved with all of Holmes's cases.
Right.
The problem is, you do that, you end up bottlenecking the world that you have, because not every... Or you end up trying to have this one person be such a criminal mastermind that he's somehow responsible for all the crime in London.
Yeah, for sure.
No,
that's definitely not the case. Although we do have a foil for our werewolf. I don't know if you want to call them a hero or an anti-hero, but a protagonist. There we go. And that is their betrayer, someone who turned them into a werewolf and then left. And so they're looking for that person and trying to find out what was the reason why they did this.
Now, with that in mind, when it comes to when it comes to the fact that this is very much built as a solo affair, I'm guessing that progression along it is going to be involving charts in terms of how other people react to you and what sort of potential actions you can take.
Yeah, there's definitely a pretty tuned in gameplay loop, right? Where there's an opportunity for the betrayer to take some actions. It's table driven, right? So there's some of those classic elements of kind of table-driven actions and options. But we brought in, I think, some things that make it kind of fun, where everything sort of centers around what phase of the moon are you currently in, because to a werewolf, how full the moon is very important. And so depending if it's a new moon, you have a whole set of actions you can do, because it's not possible for you to become a werewolf when there's a new moon. But if it's a full moon, for example, there's a even different, completely opposite set of things that you can do, because you absolutely will be a werewolf. Yeah. And then those other phases have some additional types of actions you can take.
Is it a case where the moon phase changes each scene? Or
basically, yeah.
There's certain actions that will move the scene forward and move into the next phase.
Yeah, so the scene is going to change, and you're kind of always driving forward to a new scene change. So what's happening is, as you go through a gameplay cycle, the betrayer is going to take some actions. You're going to check a few things. You're going to choose what actions you want to take. Once you finish whatever actions you're able to take, then you'll roll and figure out what moon phase you go to next. And so you're kind of getting these paint splatters of here's some things that happen to you, and here's some things that happen to you, and those are creating and hopefully starting to paint a picture of what's this character like, what happened to them, why are they chasing this individual, why did this individual do this to them, right?
Yeah. And the lunar call system that you have, the core mechanic, I did get a bit of a chuckle when I saw that one of the influences was Marvel Heroic Role Playing, which I will champion that game until someone ties me down and forces me to stop.
Such an amazing game.
I still have my copy. I have Annihilation in PDF form. I would get tormented by recommends for months because the Amazon pages for things like War of Kings weren't taken down yet. So it's like, okay, wonderful. Keep tormenting me with stuff that I won't be able to fucking get. But
yeah,
I can kind of see the DNA of that with how you're handling dice. Using D6, D8s, and D12s. So
yeah, there's a little bit of that there, but also we're using I think probably the main influence we're taking from Marvel Heroic is part of our search roll, which is a really key component of your gameplay loop. Yeah. Like you're searching, you're trying to find this person who has betrayed you, and as you make that search roll, you're gonna always roll 2 dice, and one of them is whoa, that's neat. One of them is going to give you sort of a result, and the other one is your effect. So you have to choose which one you use for which, just like you would in Marvel Heroic with the kind of, you have your total and then you have an effect dice.
I always referred, whenever I was teaching people how to play it, I always referred to it as TNT, total and tier. Because you have to decide whether or not you want to use that bigger dice for the actual success, or how well you succeed.
It's inspired by it. It's not exactly the same, but that's the idea of that part of the mechanic for sure.
So would it be fair of me to assume that no matter what sort of die you're rolling, this is an aim high affair? You're trying to roll over a certain threshold.
Absolutely. Yeah. You're always essentially trying to roll over a 4 in most cases, but sometimes so that's for general tests. So you have these things, every werewolf has troubles, right? And their troubles are kind of following them around to an extent, or you're discovering new ones. You're I don't know if discover is the right word for trouble, but you're finding new trouble wherever you go. And part of that trouble is, trying to find this person, but also there are other things that can get in your way. And part of troubles is part of overcoming troubles is testing, right? And so a test is always like a 4 or higher type of roll, which is reminiscent of Oh gosh,
Savage Worlds.
well, Savage Worlds does that. Blades in the Dark does that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I would say either of those is a good comparison there. But that's not the only way that you're using dice. A lot of times you're rolling on tables, and higher is still better, but it just depends on kind of what you get, and that's why having the three different die types helps make it interesting, because sometimes you have to use a sub
Optimal.
suboptimal choice, right? And then you might not be able to get to some of the cooler things you could potentially do, but then when you do get them, it's that much more exciting and interesting.
Mm-hmm. I could definitely see that. Now, since since you brought up Marvel Heroic, Blades in the Dark, and the like,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of those games have some sort of mechanic. I know people refer to them as meta narrative or something like that. Don't
Mm,
I don't use that term, mostly because some people have that thing live rent free in their heads for some reason. I always
sure.
call it extra effort, some sort of limited resource that you can use to give yourself a bit of an edge, but you can't rely on it. Um,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
in Marvel Heroic, it was plot points. Um,
Right.
in
Yeah.
in something like World of Darkness, it is the willpower system. In Savage Worlds, it is Benny's. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
it takes different forms depending on what Forge in the Dark game you're talking about,
Very
the
true.
the pattern is still there. Do you have
Yeah.
something akin to that with Rue from Ruin?
Actually, no. We looked at it. We considered, and we even did a little bit of play testing with something like that. And then we just went back and rebalanced the game so that it wasn't necessary. And so we kind of got away from that idea. But there are things, we do have costs for things sometimes, and a cost can be basically anything that improves your character. So you could take a temporary uh, well, not temporary, you could take a permanent reduction to one of your core attributes, like maybe you gave up your like very good ability to use your wits. Maybe and you can think of a narrative reason why that happened in this game.
Mm-hmm.
While a lot of it is very classic in terms of RPGs aesthetic, it also relies heavily on narrative concepts. So I think you're going to take something like one of those attributes, or maybe you give up an ally, or
Mm-hmm.
maybe an item that you have that was power or meaningful to you, or maybe one of your werewolf powers stops working, and then you have to figure out why did that happen, why was that the cost that I paid for overcoming this trouble that is plaguing me,
Mm-hmm.
and how did that come into play.
Yeah, and speaking of, when it comes to powers,
Hmm.
what would the cost be? What would the cost of certain powers be? Would it be limited based on what moon phase, or something else?
Oh, that's great. That's a great question. So the powers don't have an inherent cost for use, other than the fact that they are, without exception, all powers and a hindrance of some sort that comes along with them.
Mm-hmm.
So let me find a quick example maybe for you. But the general idea is that when you have, gosh, I know I've got a sheet here I could look at that will tell me just a couple of them. But when you have a power, it's always going to have an associated um, sort of downside. But the thing about that downside is it can be removed. Like, you can basically train and learn to control your power better, and that can be pretty impactful,
Mm-hmm.
and make that power much more effective. But powers are basically always active, so it's not something that you're choosing to use kind of in the moment. It's more of an always on type of effect when you have a power,
Mm-hmm.
and an always on potential downfall. Let me find. So one of the powers that you can get, for example, is telepathy. And so the power actually gives you 2 extra ranks in your sense attribute in the game.
Mm-hmm.
That's its sort of standard setting. It always gives you 2 extra sense. But also, because you're always seeing and hearing and knowing things that maybe normal people don't know, it dulls your humanity a little bit, and so your touchstone is lessened.
Mm-hmm.
But you can learn to overcome that well, I'm forgetting the term that we actually use for it, but where you can overcome that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
by spending some time focusing on it during your new moon phase.
Mm-hmm.
And so over time you can control it, and then you would be able to use telepathy and not have any negative side effect.
Yeah. Now, one of the mechanics that I saw on the page, the character sheet page, I was a bit curious about is rage.
Mm-hmm.
Especially since
Yeah.
the way it appears, it looks like rage is going to be something that is going to fluctuate during play.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Some of your troubles are going to increase or possibly decrease rage. And then there are actions that you can take during new moon and full moon to either increase or decrease rage as well.
Mm-hmm.
There is certainly sort of a middle zone that is like kind of the sweet spot for a werewolf, because their powers and they kind of rely on there being some rage, I think, in some ways. And so having a certain amount of rage is pretty good, but if you get too much, then you can get to a point where the wolf just takes over. And maybe you lose yourself completely to it. It's possible.
Mm-hmm.
And on the flip side, if the rage is too low, then maybe some of the things you've been doing are causing you more regret than you would like. And maybe at some point, you just stop.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I could very much see that. And speaking of, on the other end of things, there's the whole notion with allies, which I have a feeling allies can provide modifiers in somewhat similar to powers, though not with the advantage and disadvantage. But what exactly is starring an ally?
Ah, that's a great question. So an ally can be starred, meaning you can find a way to protect them so that they can't be lost. There are ways and things that might happen throughout the game that could cause you to lose an ally. And by starring an ally, and essentially it's, you find a way to keep them protected, right? So that they are always available.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And
so that would be something you put together narratively as well. You might say, hey, I've got an ally that is a, gosh, I should give you another real example of one of our allies. An ally that is, for example, like a head of sales. Maybe you have an ally that's a head of sales, and they give you a bonus to something, right?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you have a way that you can put them into some sort of protective custody or something that keeps them safe, but they can still do their job and give you advice when you need it.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. Now, some solo games.
The most boring ally that I possibly could have listed for you. Anyway, that's okay.
If one of the rules of combat is, if it's stupid but it works, it's not stupid.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of solo games will usually have some sort of act structure, like there's something to move their particular story along. Not necessarily linear, more of a tiers and tentpoles approach. Do you have something like that, where there are certain major beats within a given narrative that a run of Roof and Ruin are going to hit?
Yeah, for sure. So troubles are actually on a graduating scale of difficulty. So every trouble has 3 different levels of difficulty to it. So for example, you could have a trouble where you are injured and maybe burned, for example, right?
Mm-hmm.
That trouble is probably very easy if you get it early in the game and you haven't unlocked any insights yet. And insights, this is the point I'm getting to, is the thing that sort of levels up the troubles that you're going to encounter. So if you haven't unlocked any insights yet, you can probably overcome that fairly easily. But if you've already unlocked your first or even your second insight, then that trouble will be significantly more difficult. Some of our top tier troubles, a few of them,
Mm-hmm.
can even result in basically immediately the end of the game, right? It's not very likely that that'll happen, but it's a definite possibility.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
RNGesus hates everyone. So there is very much that. But I noticed the 3 symbols next to the 3 insights. Is it a case where each insight is going to be operating on a certain theme, or is it a general collection of insights that could be slotted into any one of those?
Yeah, no, there's definitely a theme to each insight as you achieve it. And some of the insights are unlocked as part of, and I didn't really talk about this either, so there's sort of 2 sets of things that kind of advance the game and change things as you go. So you're going to generally have what we call a rue trouble. Your rue trouble is always related directly to the betrayer, right? And it's going to be your drive to find them, to track them down, to observe them, and then eventually confront them, right? And so during those stages, if you haven't unlocked an insight in some other way, when you reach one of those stages, you're going to unlock an insight and go to the next sort of tier of difficulty, and learn a little bit more about what's happening between you and this betrayer.
Mm-hmm. And with that in mind, since doing a solo game is certainly a different beast than doing a game that is going to have a certain party. So I'm curious,
Really is,
within
yeah.
the full book, if you have some story seeds to help move people along, since this is a very different affair. Whether or not somebody has already got experience with story games or not, it's gonna be a different beast. No pun intended.
Yeah, it's a great pun though. I'm here for it. I think all of the troubles are very thematic, right? And they have a little bit of sort of theme that goes with them. The betrayer, as you define them, they're going to have a profession. They're going to have, some information about like how you knew them, right? Before this happened. And the betrayer actually improves over time as well. So as there's a possibility, like as part of their actions and their abilities, is that they can become more dangerous as they go along as well. So part of that is just, I mean, I guess what you're really looking for is, do we have maybe some examples of what it looks like if someone were to maybe journal along as they're playing the game? Because I don't think you have to do that, but you certainly can, and it definitely enhances my enjoyment when I do that. But
not necessarily journaling, but just something to help them get across the starting line. The equivalent of story seeds in more traditional games.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think it's not exactly like that, but there are. I think the character creation kind of puts some of those things in for you, and as you saw, I think on the character sheet, we've got a little bit of sort of a starting, almost a Mad Libs looking sort of framework for how your story starts.
The kind of Mad Lib that is character creation in the Cypher system.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, a little bit of inspiration there for sure. So bringing that in, but tying it to a very specific type of story that we want to tell, as opposed to Cypher, which is much more freeform than that.
Yeah. Freeform has its advantages, but at times, if there isn't proper guidance, it can result in what I call swim damn it. No, imagine someone teaching you how to swim by just throwing you into the deep end of the pool and then saying, "Okay, don't drown."
Definitely.
Technically, that is swimming advice.
Yeah.
Technically, but you kind of missed the point.
Yeah.
You know, it'd be a case of, I guess I'd liken it to somebody wanting a healthier drink, so they end up getting a bottle of light beer.
Yeah.
You're technically correct, but you kind of miss the point. Sometimes
Yes.
technically correct is not the best kind of correct. Now, with that said, what are you shooting for as far as a release window? Not a date per se, but a general ballpark.
Yeah, we're actually editing the manuscript right now. I think it's about, last time I looked at the updates from the editor, it's about 60% complete with editing. And then we should be able to, I'm hoping, lay it out fairly quickly for PDF. And so we think that we'll have, gosh, let me make sure I'm not conflicting with what I actually said on the Kickstarter page, because that would be really silly. But I think we should have, gosh, let me just to make sure. Okay, yes. I think we should have the PDF out to people in January. That's our goal. And then for print, we are hoping to do an offset print run for the hardcover book. And so that we've learned, because we didn't do offset printing with Arium, but we did with Cyan Starlight, which is a game by Alan Barr that we published last year. That offset printing can take a little bit longer, and so we're out to June. We think we'll be able to have that to everybody by June. That's our goal. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
Yeah, I can certainly get that.
Yeah.
Now, with that said, what are you shooting for as far as a page count? Like 150? 125?
I think it'll probably be closer to 100, but it is definitely in that neighborhood. It depends. We're doing some stretch goal things, and I didn't want to put them in the book because the book is actually done, right, and it's being edited, and I don't want to delay that for anybody, and so we're back and forth on how that's going to work. But there is a possibility, and this is, depends on funding and things like that we might give backers like a fully laid out zine, at least digital. I would love to give a physical copy to physical backers too, but I'm not certain if that's going to happen. And that should add, I would say, another probably 16 to 24 pages, somewhere in that neighborhood. Mm-hmm. So that's what we're thinking.
And it's not like a zine is going to be all that big, because it's a zine.
Right. Yeah. Yep. So we would add that to the 100 or so pages that we have in the primary book.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, I can definitely see that. But with that said, I do want to sincerely thank you for taking the time out of your schedule and coming all the way to my temple to enjoy the madness that happens here.
A pleasure.
And anytime you see fit to return, the door is always open. I hope it's not another 5 years before I see you in the temple again.
I think that will be... I hope that's really unlikely that it's that long.
Mm-hmm. and of course, a sincere thanks goes out to everyone who took the time out of their schedule to come onto the show and enjoy the madness. And there will be plenty more where that came from, as there always is here, on the open bar of the internet. But until then, on behalf of the good brothers present and not present, my name is Mildra. I am your gaming monk. Stay fucking frosty, everybody.
Awesome.